Okay, I'm fine. It's on?
Yeah, now you're live.
And then I take a mic?
Yeah, you just gotta boot Emily for a sec.
Okay. No, it's okay. Okay.
All right.
Sorry, Emily.
Oh, no worries.
I'll be back.
She's just gonna say nice things about you.
No. We made it.
Oh, make sure you turn the mic on.
Oh, gosh.
Just one button.
Hi.
Hey! Hey!
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this evening's programming with Chicagoans. Today's fabulous speaker is Emily, our resident Hegoish expert, and overall wonderful person extraordinaire. Chicago for Chicagoans is a 501c3 nonprofit, as you folks in the room probably already know. You got your card punched. Folks online, come in person. You get a punch card. It's very exciting. Thanks for all being here. As you know, our small but mighty nonprofit is donation-based. So if you're so inspired tonight to part with your cash, whether it be digital currencies, physical currencies, kidneys, firstborn children, puppies, we'll take them. Well, I've been told actually firstborn children are a little bit hard to exchange in the market, so cash works too. Keep an eye out for our upcoming programming. Next week, I will be talking about Playboy.
Woo!
Yes, it is very sold out. So if there is an upcoming program that looks especially interesting, what am I saying? They all are. Set your alarm for 9 a.m. Thursdays. That's when we drop tickets for programs 2 weeks in advance. So without further ado, I think bar line's empty, so we're ready to start. So everyone give it up for the fabulous, wonderful Emily.
All right. Okay. So let me make sure this is okay. I'll start by directing your attention to my pin. I bought this I Saw Field Santa pin on eBay for a couple of bucks, but I could not find the one I used to own, which said I Saw Field Santa 1985. And this was from my childhood when my family would go every year to Marshall Fields, go see the windows and see Santa Claus and eat lunch in the Walnut Room. And I think a lot of Chicagoans probably have similar experiences, similar fond memories of being kids or maybe adults and going to those department stores on State Street. And maybe we could start just by doing a show of hands. How many people here have personal experiences with department stores on State Street that are no longer around? Just about everybody. If you want to shout out which ones you're thinking of, go ahead.
Carson's.
Carson's, yeah. Fields, of course. Weebles. Montgomery Ward, yeah. Goldblatt's, yeah. So I'll be talking today about the rise and growth of department stores in Chicago, and I'll particularly be focusing on those big department stores on State Street and how they helped change the city, including things like how they helped change retailing in general, how they were important to issues like women's participation in public space and public life, and how they were important as workplaces as well for Chicagoans. I'll also be talking about how a big part of the allure of these shops came from the idea that they offered an experience that went beyond exchanging goods for money. And I think that's a reason why people have these fond memories of the stores. And this was true in the 1980s when I was a kid, as it was in the 1880s when these stores were very new. So I will be focusing mainly on the turn of the century period when these department stores had really become a dominant force to be reckoned with in Chicago. But we'll also talk a bit about times before and after that as well. And we can talk a little bit at the end about how these stores eventually declined. It's also worth noting that this experience of excitement, the enjoyment of the opulence at these stores wasn't always available to everybody on an equal basis. So we can also talk a bit about how things like race and class affected people's experience of these downtown stores. So the history of the State Street's department stores starts in about the 1850s. And this was when the main retail center in Chicago was on Lake Street. If you picked up the slides, or if you have them up on your phone, you can see some ads there for these early Lake Street stores of the 1850s, 1860s. These were ads mostly from the Chicago Tribune. And one interesting thing about these department stores is they were early embracers of, using newspaper advertising and other advertising practices. But at first, Lake Street was this retail center, and there weren't really department stores as such yet. There were what were called dry goods stores, which mostly sold things like fabric. You can see in the image, there's one that I enjoy that just says silks, silks, silks. But you can also see some familiar names there. There's Field, Palmer, and Leiter. Their shop on Lake Street. That was Marshall Field, Potter Palmer, and Levi Leiter. Also Carson Peary and Company. They were on Lake Street as well. And Potter Palmer was a really important driving force behind first the shops on Lake Street and then the move to State Street a little bit later. He had a dry goods store. He entered into partnership with Field and Leiter. And eventually he had the idea of moving to State Street. That was, he was a big force behind that, because at the time, Lake Street was close to the shipping industry in Chicago. That's kind of why the retail shops sprang up there. But it was kind of hemmed in. It was between the railroad tracks and the river, and also there were actually a lot of like foul smells around the shops at the time, since the water sanitation was not great, so not a great place to shop. State Street wasn't developed yet at that time, but in 1860s, that's when that move started happening. And just to talk a little bit about what shopping was like at that time, as I mentioned, there were a lot of dry goods stores at the time. There were shops that specialized in one or just a few types of merchandise. And also a lot of their merchandise was kept behind counters or in drawers. So if you were a customer, you had to talk to the sales clerk, get them to bring out this merchandise. And there wasn't really an expectation of browsing. It would be hard to do so with all these goods kept away. So you couldn't just go into the shop and look around. You were usually expected to buy something there. A few new practices were starting to come about. Some of these Lake Street shops were starting to introduce fixed prices for goods. That was pretty new at the time. Previously, there would be either more of an expectation of haggling or just merchants charging different prices based on what they thought you could pay. So different people could get charged different prices for the same item. So this was a real drawing point to certain stores. They would have titles like "one price shop" in the title. Also around the 1860s or so, 1850s maybe in some places, stores started to introduce refunds of merchandise for any reason. That was another drawing point, which Potter Palmer, among other people, introduced in these stores. But even as shopping was changing, one thing was pretty clear, and that was that shopping was considered a task for women. And you can see there is an article on the slide that was pretty typical of talking about shopping at this time. This was from a Tribune article saying, "The ladies, bless the dear creatures, are employing these fine spring days in shopping. Lake Street sidewalks on the sunny April morns and afternoons are aglow with bright silks and brighter eyes. We do not propose to ask the masculine reader's attention for an instant to the question." So as you can see, there's this somewhat dismissive tone to talk about women shoppers. But it's also worth thinking about how at this time there weren't as many pastimes and as many outings that were proper for women to do, especially if they were, as people would say at the time, unaccompanied women or unescorted women. At places like taverns, saloons, inns, restaurants, there was an expectation that women would either not go into certain places or that they would be accompanied by men. Some places didn't allow women, or it just wasn't considered proper. So shopping was an activity that was a way to get out into the city and to spend some time. So you can see how these shops becoming bigger and offering more amenities would be attractive to women at this time. There's a quote from the Tribune in 1896, kind of looking back, that sums this up. It says, "Many women of a generation or two back, and well-informed ones at that, have lived and died without ever seeing the inside of a restaurant. Such a thing, indeed, as a modest wife and mother dining unattended in a public restaurant would be considered highly improper." So you can see the allure that shopping would have. If you were a lady, you could potentially shop by yourself or with a female friend. And so as these shops started to expand and offer more services, they really provided an outlet for chiefly upper class women at first, but over time for middle class and even working class women as well. That took a little time though. So in the 1860s, this move to State Street starts to happen. And you can see there's a couple of ads there for, again, the shop that Field had at the time, as well as Carson Peary and Company again. These are next to each other. And these ran in the Tribune. If you take a look at the date there, it was October 2nd, 1871. And what happens 6 days later? So yeah, the Great Chicago Fire happens, and these buildings are just demolished in the fire. A lot of the merchandise as well. You can actually, if you look at newspapers from the time, see some accounts of people desperately trying to save some of this merchandise and, load up the expensive silks and jewelry onto wagons and try to save it. And there is an image of this actually. Here, the top image is, I believe that's a drawing there of Field Leiter and Company in their State Street store. And then the bottom image is after the fire, and it's gone. Thank you. But the stores, the owners, the managers, they were eager to reopen, and they did open in temporary locations for a while, but by a couple of years later, in the 1870s, they were back on State Street, and they kind of used this rebuilding as motivation to build ever more opulent and larger buildings. There were other new stores coming to State Street as well. One particularly important one was the Fair, and you can see the Fair cheap in that sign at the top. That's from 1875. And the Fair is an interesting example of department stores in Chicago because it did open as a department store, and it's often considered to be the first one that opened as a department store of the department stores on State Street. Other shops mainly became department stores by expanding over time and expanding into new departments, building up into bigger buildings. In fact, the Fair published a promotional book in 1915 saying, "History is clear and definite in giving Mr. E.J. Lehman uncontested credit for founding the first department store." It's not really true, definitely not uncontested, but it is kind of characteristic of a lot of the grand claims that these stores would make at the time. And you can see an ad for the Fair from some years later in the 1890s that said the largest and grandest store in the world. So these stores really wanted to be considered the biggest, the grandest. So I'll back up just a little bit here and talk about what a department store is and where that came from. There's a few contenders for the title of the first department store, and one of them is London's Harding Howell and Company's Grand Fashionable Magazine. There's an image there, an illustration, and that opened in 1796. Had 4 departments, and let's see, what were they? Furs and fans, haberdashery, jewelry and clocks, and millinery, or hats. So yeah, 4 departments, much fewer than some of the Chicago department stores would have late in the 1800s, but it was a large and opulent place. Here's a quote from the BBC describing it. "Here at last women were free to browse and shop safely and decorously away from home and from the company of men." So again, you see this association of these stores with giving women a space to go. Another contender was in Paris, and this is Le Bon Marché Rive Gauche. This opened a bit later in 1838, but was revamped in the 1850s. So a bit later than the Harding, Howell and Company, but it had a lot of other qualities that would become characteristic of the department stores. Two we've already discussed a little bit. One was offering a fixed price for goods, refunds for any reason to the customers, which you saw in the Lake Street shops in Chicago. But also they did things like bringing out merchandise from behind the counters so customers could actually browse and look at it. They didn't pressure customers to make purchases. They also wanted to offer a lot of features and amenities, such as events with live music, a salon that offered food and drinks, even a reading room for husbands, meant for while their wives shopped. So this idea of the department store as a place where you could spend the day, you could enjoy a lot of free events, and you didn't even need to necessarily buy anything, although obviously they wanted you to do that. That became more and more popular. The Émile Zola novel Au Bonheur des Dames, or The Lady's Paradise, was inspired by this Le Bon Marché store. So again, there's this idea of women in particular enjoying the amenities and the outing that the types of outings that these department stores would provide. So it didn't take too long for these practices to catch on in the US. In the 1870s, the term department store started to be used. First in a store in Pittsburgh, there was one called D.W. Evans' One Price Department Store. And not long after that, the term started popping up in Chicago and elsewhere. At around the same time, you see other department stores in cities around the US opening or expanding. So Wanamaker's in Philadelphia opened in 1876 and invented the price tag. So again, this idea of the one price, offering the same price to everyone. Macy's was also expanding at this time. Macy's was first around in the 1850s. But perhaps because Chicago was growing a lot and was rebuilding after the fire, it became closely connected with department stores in a lot of people's minds. For example, if any of you have read the Theodore Dreiser novel Sister Carrie, there's a couple of scenes in it set at the Fair department store, and the narrator even makes this comment saying something like, there were 3 department stores in about 1884, and they were all in Chicago. By the 1890s, department stores were not only a recognizable category, but they were also a matter of public debate. And you can have a look at the slides. There's some letters to the editor in the Chicago Tribune arguing pro and con about department stores. And you can kind of see what some of the arguments were. There was actually legislation that same year in the Illinois General Assembly that sought to regulate department stores and require more licensing for stores that wanted to sell items that belonged to more than one category. And this was as a result of smaller merchants feeling pressure from the department stores because they were such big, attractive places, and also because they could offer better prices since they bought so much merchandise, they were able to negotiate better deals. And you can see some of these arguments if you take a look at the letters. Some say that these stores destroy the many for the few. Some praise the department stores for these low prices, saying that they are a boon to people of moderate means. But another one says their low prices make them an evil. There's some commentary about how they treated workers, saying that they paid starvation wages. There's also a letter that says stores tend to prevent early marriages. And believe it or not, this is an argument against the stores. Because, and we can talk about this in a bit, but they hired a lot of women as workers. So this letter writer is saying that, you know, these young women are taking jobs away from men who should be providing for their families, and also, you know, they're not getting married the way they should because they're working at these stores.
How dare they?
But despite these attitudes, the stores were there to stay. And there's a couple of maps on the next couple of slides. You can see there's one from 1898. This is a transportation map, but there's a bunch of stores, a bunch of department stores on State Street by that time. There's Siegel Cooper, Rothschild, there's the Fair, Schlesinger and Meyer, the Boston store, Carson Peary Scott, and Marshall Fields are all there by that time. Just a huge number of these big stores within about, I think, a 7-block span. And then this next map is from 1947, so about 50 years later. And you can see that there's still this same span in State Street is still filled with these big department stores. Some of them the same, some of them did change over time or slightly moved like Carson's did. So the attraction of these stores was in part that they were so big and so opulent. There's a couple of pictures here. This is the building that would become Carson's. It was initially designed to be Schlesinger and Meyer's store. Briefly, Harry Selfridge, who had worked at Marshall Fields and later opened department stores in London, owned it for a very brief time. But then it was Carson's for about 100 years. There is also the Tiffany Dome at Marshall Fields that was designed in, I think, about 1907. So these stores were so big, several of them in the 1890s in Chicago kind of traded off this title of being the largest store at the time, largest store anywhere. And a few claimed to be, even if they weren't necessarily. Let's see. You can also see there's an image of all of the departments at Marshall Fields in the early 1900s. And these stores weren't just physically very large, but they offered many departments and a growing number through the years. Fields departments, or sections as they like to call them, went from 42 in 1884 to more than 100 in 1904. So just 20 years, great increase in the number of departments. And some of the departments that were offered would change over time. For example, some shops offered groceries for a while, but that didn't really catch on for very long. Toy departments were actually not as early as you might think. A lot of the department stores had temporary toy departments during the Christmas season, but it wasn't until into the 1900s that they had the permanent toy departments. And also in this graphic, you can see the great basement sales room. Bargain basements were a new thing as well at Fields in particular, but other stores also had them. And those allowed people who might not be able to pay full price to be able to shop there. In addition to getting larger and offering all of these different departments, the stores offered more and more amenities and special events to try to get customers in. There is a cartoon here, shows two women leading their children and dog into a department store in the first panel. And then in the second panel, it's titled 2 Minutes Later, and one says, "We've just enough time to make the matinee. They're going to send the dog and packages home." They've dropped off their kids and the dog and the packages. And this is titled "The Great American Public Service Institution." You know, obviously an exaggeration, but a lot of stores did offer things like nurseries and post offices. There were stationery rooms where you could write letters and use store stationery to do that. Fashion shows, lectures, classes, everything like that. Here also is an image of Marshall Field's Children's Day event that they used to have. This one is from the early 1900s, where they would offer programming for children and also for parents, things like lectures and that sort of thing. Restaurants were also offered at department stores starting in the 1890s. And again, that was something that would allow people to make a day of it and come in and enjoy themselves. Somewhat controversially at first, women who went to the department stores, even upper class, elegant women, could be served alcohol at these restaurants. Yeah. And this was somewhat controversial in some quarters at the time. There's some newspaper columnists who complain about this, about the idea that women, even who are thought of as proper, don't have to go to the saloon. They can just discreetly either have some champagne with their lunch or buy a bottle to take home.
Just had 9 kids.
The stores continued to be mostly used by women. In 1915, an estimated 90% of customers in department stores were women. Although they did try to attract men as well. They obviously had men's departments, and a number of them had men's restaurants. A men's grill, which would be kind of designed in a way that was supposed to attract male customers. There's even a story about how at Carson's, 2 women went into the men's grill one day and caused a bit of a stir. They were served, but someone in the restaurant said something like, we go to places like this to get away from you. Another thing that started to happen in the Chicago stores, similarly to at Le Bon Marché in France, was that merchandise started to be taken out of those counters and drawers and displayed to the customers. Harry Selfridge, who had worked at Fields before starting his own department stores in London, was a big force behind that in Chicago. They also tried to cycle through merchandise as quickly as possible, which was a bit of a change. Instead of the merchandise just sitting on the shelves until it's sold, the stores wanted to always offer something new. And so they would deeply discount items that they wanted to get rid of so they could bring in new things. And a lot of this is related to different technologies of the time. Stores were able to do this because transportation was making the movement of goods a lot easier. These stores weren't all the same, and there were some significant class differences that applied between the stores. You know, as you may be aware, Fields was generally known as more of an upper class, upper crust kind of store, and continued to be over the years. Carson's was sometimes considered a bit more middle class. There were some shops that were more associated with discounts and deals, probably had a greater number of working class customers. One of those was the Fair, which advertised itself as the, quote, store for the people, the downtown shopping center for the savers, the marketplace for the thrifty. And there were later stores that also advertised discounts as well, places like Goldblatt's and Wieboldt's. Some trade journals at the time talked about the carriage trade versus the shawl trade. The carriage trade being the, you know, more upper class customer, and the shawl trade not, you know, somewhat lower class.
What about the L trade?
But while these class differences did persist through the years, there was also a pretty significant blurring of the lines as well, as stores tried to offer different lines of merchandise for different customers, different price points. And also, since they did offer the chance to browse and these free events, free attractions, there was, you know, the idea that you could go to these stores even if you couldn't afford to really shop there. The State Street stores were also adopters of a lot of new technologies, early adopters. So late 19th century, early 20th century, that meant adopting electric lighting pretty early. Into the 20th century, they were pretty early adopters of air conditioning, central heating, things of that sort, elevators and escalators. Some of these technologies would only be used on the first couple of floors, like air conditioning, because just wasn't, you know, it was expensive to offer that in the whole store. But in that kind of showroom floor, they wanted to give that level of comfort. And another innovation involved showing merchandise in an appealing way. I kind of skipped past a couple of these, but here's a representation of dining. This is a restaurant at Carson's. And this is an escalator at Marshall Fields. But here you can see the store display windows, and that was a major innovation starting in the 1890s, but continuing really throughout the 20th century as stores developed new designs for their shop windows. These first two here are from Siegel Cooper in 1913. And these show a couple of different trends in these shop windows. This first one here on top was apparently known in the trade as the stocky window, or a window that showed a lot of the stock of the store. So, it's kind of shown in an artsy way, but if you take a really close look, there's some tennis rackets, some other sports material, and they're arranged in circles. So the point here is really to show the plenitude of the merchandise there. The bottom one is pretty intriguing. This is a circus scene, which is made out of handkerchiefs, like entirely out of handkerchiefs. And this was apparently a pretty common fad for a little while, to use a lot of handkerchiefs to create scenes. And then on the next slide, there's a different type of window, and this is from Marshall Fields in 1925. It was designed by Arthur Fraser, who was known as someone who really helped develop this artsy, elegant shop window. And you can see that there is some exhibiting of merchandise there. This mannequin is wearing a dress, but it's like the merchandise almost isn't the whole point there. It's more creating this sense of elegance. And you can see that in the shop windows through the years. Starting in the 1940s was when Christmas windows started, telling a story started to be used. And so the showcasing of the merchandise was not really the point. And sometimes merchandise wouldn't even be shown at all in these windows. They provided an attraction to customers and even people who weren't customers, but who were just passing by. Also another interesting development in the use of these shop windows was that Carson's, for example, sometimes used windows to indicate support for a cause or to sort of participate in civic life. In 1916, they had a window that was meant to support women's suffrage in accordance with a women's suffrage event in town at the time. So these stores, beyond just selling items, they really wanted to be part of city life. They were involved in city life not just based on what they offered to customers and these events, but also they were some of the city's biggest employers as well. One article in the Chicago Daybook in 1915 estimated that the 9 biggest stores on State Street at that time employed a total of 42,000 workers. I'm not actually sure what the population of the city at that time was, but I mean, that is a decent chunk. And the stores were particularly notable for hiring women through the late 1800s and certainly through the 20th century. You can see on the slide, there's a Tribune article from 1906 titled "Big Stores Place for Women Workers." This article estimated that in a shop with 4,000 workers, about 3,200 would be women. So this was a big change from a lot of other stores at the time. It wasn't always for the greatest reason, which you can also see in this comic. And I'm not sure if you can really make out what it says, but this is a comic of 2 women, ran in Collier's magazine, and one is saying, "But sister and I reckon that our salaries together are equal to one man's." Yeah, I mean, there was a sense that since these stores needed a lot of workers, that it wasn't as skilled work as perhaps in a smaller shop, and they could hire women for cheap. But there were some other reasons as well, and I think there was also the sense that women sales clerks could sell more easily to women customers. That was another reason. And even in things like advertising, women found it easier to get into advertising in department stores than they did in other places. So the store's willingness to hire women did attract some discussion, some debate, and you can see some interesting examples of that. Here is a Chicago Tribune article from 1907 titled "Whiskey Row Vice, Shopgirl's Peril." And this talked about how shopgirls going to and from work would be passing by saloons and might be endangered by the people there or attracted by what was in these saloons, which was dangerous. And this did have an effect on some of these saloons, some of these other establishments, because shop owners, shop managers, police would often crack down on places that were near the stores because they didn't want that to be, they didn't want customers to be bothered by that. Another thing you can see on the next slide, and I love this cartoon. It says, "Chicago's foremost duty." There's a giant fist labeled Chicago, and it's just knocking out a man who is following a woman on the street. And this was a representation of a type of man known as a masher who would follow women and, perhaps harass them, either customers or workers. So there was more visibility of this issue at the time, with the stores becoming bigger, and women put pressure on authorities and stores to help them avoid the problem of street harassment at that time. You can see in the next slide, this is jumping forward a bit, but here's an ad from the 60s saying, "Don't shop in the Loop." And one thing that is worth keeping in mind when you think about the workers and the shoppers at the big department stores on State Street is there was a lot of discrimination there as well. They did offer opportunities to women as shoppers as well as workers, but they were pretty well known for discriminating, particularly against Black Chicagoans. In 1914, Ida B. Wells reported that a clerk at Fields had ignored her and then insulted her. And then a couple of years later, the Chicago Negro Conference as well spoke at a meeting about the widespread problem of discrimination at Fields and other stores. And this did continue. This 1960s ad calls out Loop stores for supporting politicians who were against making the schools more integrated. And definitely into the 50s and 60s, there were definitely problems with hiring practices at a lot of the State Street department stores. They did have some Black workers or other people of color, but generally not in very visible roles. It would be more behind the scenes. And that probably drove some people away from the shops and to neighborhood stores instead. And just kind of jumping ahead a bit, we can talk a little bit about how the department stores did change over the course of the 20th century. They remained dominant for a long time. They did have to change getting into the 1920s, 30s, 40s. There was a sense that they needed to do something new to attract different and younger customers. You can see an example of this. This is from Life magazine, from a cover story. The early department stores had mostly focused on married women shoppers. And over time, as youth culture became more predominant in the United States throughout the 20th century, they had this sense that they needed to grow and adapt. So this calls out the college girl as a customer and talks about the college board members at Carson Peary Scott. A lot of these stores would hire college girls to advise on purchases that the store would make or to work as sales clerks in an effort to bring in younger customers. They also expanded offerings for children at the time, and this would continue throughout the 20th century as the sense was that toys were a big market, and so they wanted to offer more and more things to kids. Bridal departments became bigger over the course of the 20th century. Fields was actually the first place to offer a wedding registry in 1914, but into the 20th century, this also became a bigger and bigger part of these stores. You can see display windows continued to be prominent through the years. Here's another image of a new department, or I don't know if it was exactly new, but certainly very reorganized, Marshall Field's music department from the 1960s, selling records and technology like that. So the stores, some of them at some times, they wanted to fight this idea that they might be seen as stodgy, while also continuing to celebrate things like anniversaries and how they'd been a part of the city for many years. So you did still see things like 100-year anniversaries in places like Fields, but also new designs, new merchandise. As the 20th century neared its end, that's when you start to see the idea that these stores weren't going to be able to last too much longer. It was in the 1980s that both Fields and Carson's were sold, and they hung on with the same names for a while after that. But over the years, certain services, certain products that used to be made in Chicago were, went somewhere else. And eventually, after State Street had changed many times over the years, new shops came in, other shops closed. Early 20th century, you did see a lot of the last holdouts closing, their names changing, and that sort of thing. And the last photo there is the protest in 2006 of changing the name of Marshall Fields to Macy's. And I thought I would close by just giving a quote from one of those protests at the time. People were really passionate, wanting to keep the store named fields, even though certain things had changed over the years. You know, Frango mints were no longer made there. The windows at Fields, which used to be completely made in Chicago, were no longer made in Chicago. But people, you know, really still wanted to keep the name. And they explained the reasoning behind that. There was one quote in an article from a member of Fields Fans Chicago saying that Marshall Fields creates an experience that transcends shopping. And that was the aim of these stores, to try to create this experience, bring people in, and, you know, the ultimate goal might have been to sell, but really to create this experience. And I think that's what a lot of people worried was going away, and why these stores are missed today. Great.
Questions?
Over there. Chicago stores will first offer credit or credit cards at all?
Repeat the question.
The question is, were Chicago stores the first to offer credit or credit cards? You know, I'm not sure offhand about the credit card issue. I think some of them definitely were early in that. Also, the idea of offering goods on a cash basis was something that was a bit of a novelty as well, since before the department stores became so dominant, a lot of shops would have customers settle their accounts a few times through the years, and a few shops, like I know the Boston store was one of them that did this, a couple others as well. They operated on a cash-only basis, so that was new, or at least uncommon at the time.
Other questions?
Yes.
So you mentioned how retail stores were segregated. What were the black department stores like, or were there black department stores?
There were some. I mean, I don't know that there were really black department stores, but there were certainly department stores that had a larger proportion of black customers. I think one in particular was Gately's People's Store, which was on the south side.
Roseland.
Yeah, that had more black customers.
Yes.
And in fact, during the 1930s, there was a movement that mainly started in Chicago and spread through the country. Don't buy where you can't work. And this focused a lot on department stores and other places in mostly black neighborhoods where, you know, at first they were reluctant to hire black workers as well. I think they did make a lot more progress on that issue in the neighborhood stores than they did at the big State Street stores at the time. Yes.
The building where the Fair Company was, is that still around?
You know, I think, let me see.
I wondered if it was where Sears opened up in.
Yeah, you might be right about that. So, okay, right. The Fair building was later Montgomery Ward. So I think that is no longer around, the building.
The whole building was torn down?
Mm. Yes.
You've mentioned a number of people, Marshall Field, Palmer, Selfridge. They became some of the most prominent, wealthy Chicagoans, didn't they?
They
know
did, yeah.
Palmer lived on about 18th and Prairie, which was the neighborhood to be in if you were rich in Chicago.
Yeah, Marshall Field lived on Prairie Avenue as well, and he had a house that was the first house in Chicago to have electric lighting. And it was something like $2 million in the money of the time. It was the equivalent of something like 45 million today. It was a very, very nice house. I think Field was for a while the richest person in America, and Palmer and others certainly were very wealthy as well.
We have an online question. Fields was known for Frango mints. Were there any other foods that were very well associated with like certain department stores?
Yes, there were, and I'm trying to think of some good examples. They did, many of them had restaurants, and they did offer specific meals. One that comes to mind is also from Fields, the pot pie there, which was very well known through the years. There's actually a legend about that Fields started serving food because a few women in the millinery department were feeling faint and needed something to sustain them. So this woman working in the hats department shared the pot pie, and the restaurant grew from there. Not really true, but that was the legend.
Yeah, a lot of questions about pot pie and and women's only dining areas. Was that a Chicago invention?
I don't believe so. I think that was pretty common in the U.S. and probably in other places as well.
As recently as when I was in college, which is not recent, I will add, I still saw places in Ontario, Canada, where there were women's entrances to the bar and a divider in taverns, men and couples basically had the run of the place. But if women were going to go in with a few women, this was mainly in small towns, but they had to go into an area, I suppose, where they could be monitored or something. I don't know.
There's still a restaurant in Whiting in Indiana. If anyone's been to Keith's, they do have separate doors. I don't think anyone actually uses the separate doors, but they still exist. Yes.
So, what was did these department stores use immigrant labor at all, or how did they fit into the stores?
So the question is about immigrant labor. Is this a question of just did the stores use immigrant labor?
And what was
They
their story
did.
as part of the department store?
What is
their story? Do they have a contribution
Yes. The second question was what is the immigrant story as part of the department stores? And actually, a number of stores were owned by immigrants as well. Carson Peary Scott was started by initially Samuel Carson and John Peary, who were immigrants from Scotland. Mandel Brothers, that was also started by immigrants. Wieboldt's also was started by an immigrant from Germany, I believe. Goldblatt's, yeah. And I don't have statistics about immigrant workers, but they would have been pretty common. They're, going back to the early years of the stores, child labor was pretty common, and there wasn't the same kind of regulation of the labor in those days. So certainly, I think they would have hired a wide variety of people. there definitely would have been a number of immigrants, especially since the population of Chicago included a lot of immigrants, through the years, but particularly a large proportion when these stores were growing a lot.
Any other questions?
Could you comment on these stores and the catalog and mail order trade?
Yeah, that's
Chicago invention.
yeah. The question was about these stores and their connection to the catalog or mail order trade, and they were very closely connected. So in the 1870s, just when department stores were really getting going in Chicago and really expanding a lot, that was about the same time that mail order catalogs started in Chicago. First, Montgomery Ward, which I think started as just a page of items, and Montgomery Ward was really the first mail order company to have a full line of items. But it ballooned and just became this 1,000-page catalog in a few decades, I think. And Sears followed, I believe, in around 1890, 1893. And then, of course, Montgomery Ward and Sears became retail stores as well on State Street. There's actually a story about Montgomery Ward and how the company became convinced to open retail stores, because at first they didn't have the retail stores. They opened a showroom. I think it was in Indiana, but I'm not completely sure. And it wasn't a retail store, but you could go there and you could see the products and then go home and, place your order in the catalog. And customers really didn't like this. They, they didn't understand why they couldn't take these products home. So eventually, Montgomery Ward decided to, open some retail shops.
What do you know about that country shop in Marshall Field?
Sorry, the country shop?
That's that. The 28 shop or whatever.
Oh, the 28. Yeah, that was for like designer clothes. Yeah, I think that had started, and I don't have a year for that offhand, but that was kind of part of the 20th century development of the stores and trying to attract new customers and offer new things. I think Fields and Carson's as well, since they were, such close competitors a lot of the time, they both took a lot of moves to try to attract, to try to be associated with fashion. So Fields had the 28 shop. Carson's also had designer departments and had fashion shows and things like that.
All right. Last question. No? No more? All right. We'll give it up for Emily. Well, this is where I just politely ask you guys for a donation if you're feeling generous this evening. Olivia's got a cash jar in the back. We also accept all the internet platforms. All of your donations pay for camera, streaming equipment, and pay for our speakers and all of the great things that we're able to do as an all-volunteer organization. So We do appreciate it. Please, next week, come back. Livia's talking about Playboy. That lecture is fully sold out, so I wish you the best of luck on the wait list. And 2 weeks from now, we still have some seats left for a lecture that will be called Streets of a Go, looking at historic streetscapes and how our streets have changed. So make sure you guys come back. We still have quite a few more lectures left. So thanks, guys.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
I learned so much.